The maid was fired for being pregnant. Unaware her baby's necklace revealed the royal heir he had long sought. The winter snow swirled like accusations around the royal palace as Sarah clutched her swollen belly against the biting cold. Inside, the halls gleamed with unyielding polish, tapestries aligned in flawless symmetry, every corner echoing the ironclad order of the realm. Everything in this grand fortress bent to the command of one man, King Alaric, sovereign of unassailable power. Everything except her. Oh, astonishing, isn't it? But before we reveal how this incredible moment came to be, I have a question for you. Do you believe that destiny is written in the stars, or do we make it ourselves? Let me know in the comments below, and tell me, where in the world are you watching from today? I love reading you stories. Now, settle in, hit that subscribe button to join our family, and let me tell you the truth about what really happened. The steam from the cauldrons hung heavy in the royal kitchens, mingling with the sharp tang of onions and the faint, metallic bite of polished iron. It was a realm unto itself, this underbelly of the palace, cramped and sweltering despite the winter's siege beyond the stone walls. Sarah moved through it like a shadow, her simple gray uniform straining against the swell of her belly, hidden beneath a loose apron that no longer fooled anyone. Her hands, chapped and trembling from endless scrubbing, paused over a basin of soapy water as the door to the servant quarters banged open. Mr. Hargrove, the head butler, loomed in the threshold, his face a mask of frostbitten severity, as if the storm outside had seeped into his very bones. His eyes, small and unyielding as flint, raked over her. The other maids scattered like startled birds, their whispers dying into the hiss of boiling pots. Sarah's heart lurched. She had felt his gaze lingering these past weeks, heavy with suspicion. "Miss Ellis," he intoned, his voice a whip-crack in the humid air. He stepped forward, boots echoing on the flagstones, and seized her wrist with fingers like manacles. "Turn around." She obeyed, numb, her back to him as he yanked up the hem of her apron. The curve of her pregnancy bloomed undeniable in the lamplight, a secret no longer shrouded. Gasps rippled from the corners, but no one dared intervene. Hargrove released her with a snort of disgust, wiping his hand on his starched cuff as if she'd soiled him. "A disgrace," he spat, loud enough for the entire quarters to hear. "Carrying a bastard in the house of the king. Do you think these walls are blind? Or that His Majesty's grace extends to whores who sully the royal service?" Sarah's knees buckled, but she caught herself on the basin's edge, water sloshing over her knuckles. "Please, sir," she whispered, her voice cracking like thin ice. "It's not. I never meant. Spare me your excuses." His lip curled, revealing teeth yellowed by years of unyielding command. He was the enforcer of every edict, the blind sentinel of decorum, and in his world, mercy was a flaw sharper than any blade. "Pack your things. You're dismissed. Out by the servants' gate before the hour turns. The palace harbors no such filth." The wind howled then, rattling the narrow windows like a beast at the door, flinging wet snow against the panes in furious sheets. Sarah glanced toward the frost-laced glass, her reflection a pale ghost beside the blur of white beyond. "But sir, the storm. I have nowhere. No family, no coin. The child." Hargrove's eyes narrowed to slits. "The child is your burden, not mine, nor the realm's. Leave or I'll have the guards drag you." He turned on his heel, the door slamming shut behind him, sealing her in with the suffocating weight of finality. She sank to the floor, arms cradling her belly as sobs tore free raw, silent things swallowed by the kitchen's ceaseless clamor. The necklace, tucked beneath her bodice, pressed cool against her skin, its pendant a hidden promise she could scarcely believe anymore. Outside, the snow buried the world in indifference, and Sarah wondered if it would bury her too. The servant's entrance was a narrow scar in the palace's flank, its iron door groaning open like a reluctant confession. Sarah stepped through, a threadbare shawl clutched around her shoulders, her meager bundle, a few linens and a chipped porcelain cup, tucked under one arm. The wind met her like a living fury, whipping her skirts and stinging her cheeks with shards of ice. Snow lashed sideways, blurring the world into a monochrome haze, and the gates loomed ahead like the jaws of some indifferent beast. She stumbled forward, boots sinking into drifts that swallowed her ankles, the cold seeping through wool and bone. The palace receded behind her, its lights winking out one by one, as if the fortress itself were turning its back. No farewells from the maids. They had melted into the shadows, eyes averted, hands busy with tasks that kept them safe. Sarah was alone now, adrift in the storm's embrace, her belly a heavy anchor pulling her toward the earth. Her fingers, numb and questing, slipped beneath her bodice to the locket's chain. It was warm against her skin, a talisman forged in folly and fire. She traced its engraved edges, a crowned rose, thorns entwined, and the world tilted, the gale's roar fading to the murmur of violins and laughter long past. It had been spring then, the palace gardens ablaze with lanterns at the masked ball, a night when ranks dissolved under silk and shadow. Sarah, borrowed into service for the grand affair, had carried trays of crystal flutes through throngs of nobles, her uniform a whisper amid the rustle of brocades. He had appeared like smoke from the hedges, a soldier in a half-mask of black velvet, his cloak unmarked by insignia, his eyes the color of storm-tossed seas. "Dance with me," he'd murmured, voice low and roughened by intent, his gloved hand warm on hers. They had slipped away to the moonlit arbor, where jasmine tangled the trellises and the air hummed with secrets. No titles exchanged, only truths stripped bare. Her dreams of a life beyond scrubbing floors, his burdens of a crown that choked like a noose. His lips had claimed hers under the stars, fierce and fleeting, and when he pressed the locket into her palm, "For the light in your eyes," he'd said, it felt like a vow sealed in silver. Dawn had stolen him away, leaving only whispers of a king vanished into duty, and her, forever marked. The memory shattered as a gust hurled snow into her face, blinding and bitter. The locket burned cold now, a lie against her palm. What soldier? What promise? The child within kicked, a desperate flutter, and Sarah's vision swam. The main gates rose before her, wrought iron filigreed with frost, unyielding sentinels to a world that offered no quarter. Her legs gave way, the bundle tumbling into the drift. She collapsed to her knees, then full into the snow, the chill blooming through her like ink in water. Sobs racked her, muffled by the wind's ceaseless dirge, as the gates blurred to ghosts. The storm would claim her, she thought, or the cold, either way, a quiet end to a stolen dream. The locket slipped free, glinting mockingly in the pale light, and Sarah closed her eyes, surrendering to the white oblivion. The royal carriage thundered toward the gates like a beast roused from slumber, its ebony lacquer gleaming dully under the storm's onslaught. Hooves churned the snow to froth, and the 6 white stallions snorted plumes of frost, their harnesses jingling with silver urgency. Inside, King Alaric sat rigid, his broad frame swathed in furs, a map of the northern borders unfurled across his knees. The day's council had dragged like chains, barons squabbling over grain stores, whispers of unrest in the border keeps. But the palace promised Huthfire and mulled wine, a brief respite from the crown's unyielding weight. From the battlements, the guards' shouts cut through the gale, raw and ragged. "Clear the approach. His Majesty returns." One cupped his hands to his mouth, bellowing into the white void, while another wrestled the portcullis chain, iron groaning against the wind's sabotage. Snow devils danced in the torchlight, twisting like specters, and the gates creaked open just enough for the procession to squeeze through. The lead guard scanned the drifts, his lantern swinging wild, but saw only the relentless blur, until a muffled cry pierced the din, faint as a dying echo. Alaric's head snapped up, the map forgotten. Through the frost-veiled window, a shape resolved in the snow, a huddled form, dark against the white, limbs splayed like broken wings. A woman, he knew it in an instant, curled near the gate's shadow, unmoving save for the shallow rise of her chest. His blood iced over, not from the cold but from the fury that coiled in his gut. Who would leave a soul to the storm's mercy? Not in his realm, not under his watch. Halt! The command boomed from his lips, a thunderclap that silenced the wind itself. The driver yanked the reins, the carriage lurching to a snow-muffled stop mere yards from the gates. Protocol shattered like thin glass. Kings did not dismount in tempests, did not expose themselves to the elements without fanfare. But Alaric was already moving, the door flinging wide as he surged out, his royal cape, a cascade of midnight velvet edged in ermine, billowing behind him like a banner of wrath. The guards froze, faces paling beneath their helms. "Your Majesty, the storm, it's madness too," one stammered, but Alaric's glare silenced him, eyes like forged steel under brows thunderous with rage. "Madness?" he snarled, voice low and lethal, striding forward with boots that crushed the snow to powder. "You stand here shouting orders while a woman freezes at your feet? Is this the vigilance I demand? Or have you grown so idle that even the gate's shadows harbor the forgotten?" The guard swallowed, gesturing helplessly at the figure. "Sire, she's a servant, dismissed," the butler said. Alaric cut him off with a slash of his gloved hand, the wind tearing at his cloak as he closed the distance. The air bit like fangs, but he felt only the burn of shame. Not his own, but theirs, for this neglect in his name. The woman lay still, her shawl a sodden ruin, dark hair fanned across the drift like spilled ink. Something twisted in his chest, a hook from some half-buried dream, as he knelt in the snow, heedless of the wet seeping through his breeches. His hand reached out, tentative, brushing the chill from her cheek, and froze. There, against her throat, glinted a chain, a pendant catching the faint lantern glow. A crowned rose, thorns entwined. His breath caught, the world narrowing to that silver sigil, a ghost from a night of masks and stolen fire. The snow clung to Alaric's gloves like a shroud as he cupped her chin, tilting her face toward the lantern's feeble glow. Her skin was alabaster pale, lips tinged blue, but those eyes, storm gray and flecked with gold, snapped open, hazy with delirium. They locked on his and time fractured. He knew them, those depths that had unraveled him once under a canopy of stars, pulling secrets from a king disguised as a wanderer. "You," he breathed, the word a ghost on the wind, his thumb tracing the curve of her jaw as if to anchor the memory. "Sarah." The name flooded back, sharp as a blade's edge, from a night when masks had fallen and crowns meant nothing. She stirred weakly, a gasp escaping her as the child within shifted, a restless wave against her ribs. Her hand fluttered to her belly, fingers fumbling at the sodden neckline of her bodice, and the locket tumbled free. Golden, it swung on its chain like a pendulum of fate, catching the light in a blaze that pierced the storm's pallor. The clasp, delicate as a lover's promise, gave way under the motion, the halves parting with a soft click. Inside, nestled in velvet lining, gleamed a miniature portrait. His own face, rendered in exquisite oils, the artist's brush capturing the hard line of his jaw, the intensity of those same storm-gray eyes, a younger Alaric staring out as if from the arbor's shadows. The world stilled. The wind's howl dulled to a distant keen, the guard's murmurs fading into irrelevance. Alaric's breath seized, a vice around his lungs, as the truth uncoiled like smoke. The soldier's tryst, the silver vow, the air blooming unseen in her womb. This was no stray servant, no forgotten wraith. This was his light returned, carrying his blood through the kingdom's frozen veins. His knees buckled, the snow yielding with a wet crunch, mud seeping through the fine wool of his breeches, staining the royal weave with indifferent filth. He cared not. The cape pooled around him like spilled night, ermine fringes sodden and heavy, as he sank fully before her, one hand still cradling her face, the other hovering over the locket as if it might vanish. "It is you?" he gasped, voice raw and reverent, the words torn from a throat thick with awe and ache. Tears, hot, traitorous, pricked his eyes, blurring her to a haloed vision. The king of unassailable power knelt in the muck, a supplicant to the woman fate had cast out, the guards gaping like statues felled by lightning. In that moment, the realm's iron order cracked, and all that remained was the fragile pulse between them. A locket's whisper, a child's unspoken claim, and the storm bearing witness to a throne remade. The storm's fury seemed to hold its breath as Hargrove burst from the servant's postern, his coattails flapping like raven's wings in the gale. Word had flown through the lower halls like a spark in dry tinder. The king returned unannounced, and a vagrant at the gates, some wretched soul defying the edict of dismissal. He had sent her packing himself, Sarah Ellis, the swollen-bellied stain on the palace's honor, and now, with his majesty's arrival, justice would be swift. Hargrove's boots skidded on the iced path, his face flushed with righteous zeal, lantern raised high to illuminate the trespasser's doom. "Sire!" he called, voice slicing the wind. "This woman is no guest. She's a dismissed wretch, a scandal unfit for your eyes. Shall I summon the watch to haul her away?" The light from his lantern spilled across the snow like spilled blood, catching the tableau in stark relief. The king, not towering in command but sunk low in the drift, his royal form bowed before the very outcast Hargrove had scorned. Alaric's cape draped the white like a fallen standard, mud and melt staining its velvet to ruin, and in his grasp the woman, pale, trembling, her hand limp over the golden locket that dangled open like a gutted secret. Hargrove's stride faltered, the lantern dipping as color drained from his jowls, leaving him ashen as old parchment. Kneeling, the sovereign of the realm, on his knees in the filth, cradling a servant like a lost relic? The butler's throat worked soundlessly, a wheeze escaping as the implications coiled around him like the wind's icy fingers. Protocol inverted, power upended, and he, the unyielding arbiter, suddenly the fool in the frost. Alaric rose then, slow as judgment's dawn, gathering Sarah against his chest with a tenderness that belied the storm in his frame. She sagged into him, her shawl unraveling like forgotten thread, the child's murmur a faint ripple beneath her breath. His arm encircled her waist, steady as an oath, shielding her from the gale's bite, while his free hand closed the locket with a snap that echoed like a gauntlet thrown. The guards parted like wheat before a scythe as he turned, his gaze falling upon Hargrove. A stare forged in the heart of winter, eyes like ice over abyssal depths, promising tempests yet to break. The butler's knees threatened to buckle, his lantern trembling in a grip gone white-knuckled. "Why, your majesty," he stammered, the words ash on his tongue. "I acted for the house's sanctity." Alaric's voice cut through, low and lethal, each syllable a blade honed on the whetstone of betrayal. "Did you cast my queen, the mother of my heir, out into this storm?" The question hung in the air, heavier than the snow-laden clouds, stripping the wind to silence. Hargrove's world tilted, the palace's unyielding order fracturing beneath him. As the king's shadow loomed vast and unforgiving, the realm's iron will now a noose drawn taut. The great oaken doors of the palace front yawned wide under the guard's frantic heave, admitting the storm's howl in a single savage gust. Alaric strode through them unyielding, Sarah cradled in his arms like a sacred relic unearthed from the frost, her head lolling against his shoulder, the golden locket now tucked safely within his fist, its chain coiled around her wrist like a binding vow. No lowly servant's postern for her passage this night. This was the threshold of kings, flanked by marble lions whose eyes gleamed with torchlight, the vaulted hall beyond echoing with the thunder of his boots on polished stone. Courtiers and retainers spilled from alcoves like startled moths, their silks and velvets a riot of color against the invading white, gasps rippling through the throng as the sovereign bore his burden through the heart of his domain. Whispers chased them, "The king? A woman? In the snow?" But Alaric's gaze swept the assembly like a scythe, silencing the murmur to a held breath. Hargrove trailed at a distance, a specter diminished, his earlier pallor now a sickly green under the chandelier's golden blaze. The butler's hands twisted at his cuffs, the weight of his folly pressing like an unseen yoke, but Alaric spared him no glance. Vengeance would simmer, cold and deliberate, for now the realm's future stirred faintly in the cradle of his arms. Up the grand staircase they ascended, the air warming from hearth glow to summer's breath, tapestries of ancient triumphs whispering against the walls as if in benediction. Sarah's lashes fluttered, her fingers curling weakly into the fur of his cape, and a soft moan escaped her lips, half pain, half the first thaw of trust. "Alaric," she breathed, the name a secret unfurling, and his heart clenched like a fist around thorns. The royal chamber's doors burst open at his command, admitting a flurry of silk and starched linen. The royal physician, grizzled and swift, his black bag clinking with vials and probes. A cadre of maids, eyes wide as saucers, bearing ewers of steaming water scented with lavender and warmed linens folded like prayers. They descended upon her as Alaric laid her upon the canopied bed, its brocades a sea of sapphire and gold, the fire in the grate roaring to life under a servant's bellows. "Gently," he growled, voice of velvet blade, hovering at the bedside as hands worked with reverent haste. Stripping the sodden shawl, wrapping her in downy blankets, the physician's fingers probing her pulse with murmurs of "strong. The babe holds." Sarah's eyes met his across the bustle, storm-gray depths clearing to a fragile dawn, and he knelt once more, not in snow but in sanctuary, pressing his lips to her knuckles. "Rest now, my light. The storm breaks for us." Word spread like wildfire through the palace veins, courtiers clustering in the antechamber, the air thick with speculation's smoke. Alaric rose at last, his frame casting long shadows in the firelight, and stepped to the balcony overlooking the great hall below, a cavern of vaulted stone and flickering sconces, where nobles had gathered in uneasy vigil. He leaned upon the balustrade, the locket heavy in his palm, and let his voice ring out, clear as a clarion over the hush. "The lost heir has been found." The words fell like jewels into silence, then erupted in a tide of awe gasps, bows, the rustle of knelt skirts. Born through trial and tempest, returned to claim what fate decreed. Let heralds ride at dawn. The realm rejoices, for winter yields to spring. Below, the hall bowed as one, the king's silhouette a pillar of unassailable resolve, while in the chambers behind, Sarah's hand rested upon her belly, the child's kick a quiet herald of thrones yet to come. The fire in the royal chambers crackled like a conspirator, casting amber tongues across the tapestried walls and gilding the edges of the four-poster bed where Sarah lay propped on a mound of silken pillows. The physician had retreated with nods of cautious optimism, the maids with trays of broth and bombs, leaving only the hush of embers and the weight of unspoken years. Alaric drew a low chair close, his broad hand enveloping hers, the calluses of a king who wielded both sword and scepter rough against her skin. The storm outside had relented to a sullen patter against the leaded panes, as if the heavens themselves paused for their reckoning. "You've haunted me," he murmured, voice a low rumble beneath the hearth's sigh. His thumb tracing the locket's chain now looped about her neck like a reclaimed tether. "That night in the summer gardens, under the willow's veil, your laughter like bells in the twilight. I was no soldier then, just a man fleeing the court's vipers, my face shadowed by a simple hood. We spoke of stars and stolen freedoms, and when I left at dawn, I swore I'd return with a name unburdened by crowns." Sarah's eyes, warmed now to the gray of gathering dusk, met his without flinching, though her free hand cradled the subtle swell of her belly, a living bridge across the chasm of time. And I waited, Alaric, through the harvest moons and the first frost, poring over every missive from the postern gate. Your letters came at first, sealed with that crowned rose, promising a life beyond these walls. Then silence, like a door slammed in the night. I thought you'd tired of the maid's illusions, that the palace's whispers had poisoned you against me. So I hid the truth of our child, fearing it would bind you to regret. He leaned closer, the firelight etching hollows in his cheeks, shadows of the boy she'd known in the dapple of leaves. Regret? Gods, Sarah, I scoured the taverns and byways for word of you, convinced you'd fled with some merchant's coin or a lover's arm. The letters I sent, dozens, each heavier with the ache of absence, returned unopened or vanished into couriers' pouches. It carved me hollow, that abandonment I imagined, until duty sealed the wound with ice. A tear traced her cheek, catching the flame's glow like a fallen spark. Stolen, she whispered, the pieces slotting with a clarity that stole her breath. The rival Lady Eloan, wasn't it? Her spies in the servants' hall, jealous of your shadowed glances at the ball. She confessed it once, in a wine-loosened boast, how she intercepted the post, burned your words to ash and forged my silence. A game of thrones, played with our hearts as pawns. Alaric's face darkened, a thunderhead gathering, but then softened as understanding bloomed between them. Fragile, fierce, a flower pushing through winter's crust. No more games, he vowed, rising to gather her into his arms, the bed's linens whispering surrender. His lips found hers in the fire's warm halo, a kiss born of famine's end. Slow at first, tasting of salt and starlit vows, then deepening to a claim that mended fractures long concealed. The child stirred between them, a flutter of affirmation, as the flames danced on, witnesses to a reunion forged not in crowns, but in the quiet truth of two souls, entwined at last. The great hall of the palace shimmered like a jewel forged from dawn's first light, its vaulted arches draped in banners of crimson and gold, the air thick with the scent of beeswax candles and blooming white lilies, harbingers of renewal after winter's siege. Trumpets pealed from the galleries, a cascade of silver notes that stirred the assembled nobles like leaves in a gathering breeze, their finery a tapestry of silk and sable, jewels winking in the chandelier's blaze. This was no mere courtly revel. It was coronation's breath, the realm's heart laid bare under Alaric's unyielding gaze, now softened by the vow etched in firelight and fate. Sarah emerged from the antechamber on a tide of whispers, her gown a river of royal gold that clung and cascaded, embroidered with the crowned rose in threads of sun-spun silk. No longer the shadowed maid in gray wool, she moved with the quiet grace of one reborn, her figure restored to lithe elegance by the month's gentle passage, the child now a warm weight in her arms rather than a hidden swell. The infant prince slumbered against her breast, swaddled in velvet the color of midnight skies, a downy fist curled near the locket that dangled at her throat. Its golden heart forever mended, a talisman of trials transcended. Her hair, unbound and crowned with laurels, fell in waves of chestnut fire, and as she ascended the dais, the hall fell to a reverence deeper than silence. Awe, threaded with the envy of those who had once averted their eyes. In the throng's shadowed fringes, Hargrove lurked like a blight upon the bloom, a specter in coarse homespun, his once starched cuffs frayed to rags, demoted to the stables where the wind's bite was his only counsel. Exile would have been mercy. This was justice's slow grind, the unyielding enforcer now mucking stalls and whispering to horses. His flinty eyes dulled to coals as he watched the woman he'd cast into the snow ascend unchallenged. No noble sneer marked his passage through the crowd. He was invisible, a footnote in the realm's grand scroll, his cruelty repaid in the anonymity of straw and shadow. Alaric's glance found him once, brief as a blade's glint, ice over promise, and Hargrove shrank, the weight of his ruin heavier than any chain. The high priest approached, his robes a whisper of ancient linen, bearing the consort's circlet upon a cushion of ivory samite, a band of gold wrought with thorns and roses, echoing the locket's sigil. Alaric stood at the throne's apex, resplendent in ermine and steel, his hand extended to draw Sarah beside him. "Before gods and witnesses," intoned the priest, voice rolling like distant thunder, "I name thee Sarah, Lady of the Rose, consort to the crown, guardian of the blood that binds our fates." The circlet settled upon her brow, cool as a lover's vow, and the hall erupted in acclamation, a roar that shook the rafters like spring's first storm. Then, with a nod from his father, Alaric lifted the babe high, the child's eyes, storm-gray and gold-flecked, blinking open to the light. "Behold," the king proclaimed, voice a clarion that pierced every heart, "Eldric, crowned prince of the realm, heir to throne and tempest, born of love's defiant fire." Cheers swelled anew, petals raining from the balconies like blessings from the skies, as Sarah's gaze met Alaric's over the bundle of their future. Tender, triumphant, the storm at last stilled to serenity's song. In that golden hour, the palace bent not to iron order, but to the bloom of what had been lost and reclaimed. 10 years had woven their silken threads through the palace's stone heart, turning tempests to tapestries of quiet bloom. The gardens, once a stage for masked whispers and stolen kisses, now sprawled in midsummer's lavish embrace, roses rioting in crimson cascades, their thorns softened by petals that drifted like confetti from a forgotten revel. Sunlight slanted through the willows, gilding the gravel paths where laughter rang clear as a bell, unshadowed by crowns or secrets. Queen Sarah reclined upon a wrought iron bench, her gown of ivory linen whispering against the mossy cushions, the locket still a faithful companion at her throat, its golden face now etched with the faint patina of time, holding not just a portrait, but the weight of a legacy. Beside her, King Alaric sat with the ease of a man unburdened, his once thunderous frame softened by years of hearthside vigils and council fires tamed. His hand rested upon hers, fingers interlaced in the absent rhythm of habit, their rings, matched bands of rose gold, catching the light like vows renewed. Below them, on the sun-dappled lawn, Prince Eldric chased a butterfly's erratic flight, his laughter a cascade of silver, dark curls tousled by the breeze. At 10 summers, he was a whirlwind of his father's resolve and his mother's grace. Storm-gray eyes alight with curiosity, cheeks flushed from the chase. He paused at a cluster of wildflowers, plucking one with exaggerated care, then bounded up the slope to present it to his mother, stem first, petals trembling in his fist. "For you, Mama," he declared, bowing with mock solemnity. "The fairest queen in all the realms." Sarah's smile unfolded like dawn on the sea, drawing him into her lap where he nestled without hesitation, the butterfly forgotten in the grass. "And what of the flower, my bold prince? Does it bow to blood or to kindness?" Eldric tilted his head, brow furrowing in that thoughtful crease Alaric wore during late-night decrees. "To kindness, I think. The sun warms it the same, noble or weed." Alaric leaned in, his voice a gentle rumble, rich with the timbre of tales told by firelight. "Wise beyond your years, son. Remember this, true nobility lies not in the blood that courses through veins of silk or steel, but in the heart that chooses mercy over might, light over shadow. A crown is but metal. It is the soul that forges a kingdom." The boy nodded solemnly, then grinned, mischief sparking as he slipped free to dash toward a fountain spray, splashing arcs of water that caught the sun in prisms. Sarah watched him go, her head resting against Alaric's shoulder, the gardens hum a lullaby around them. Bees in the lavender, leaves rustling secrets to the wind. In the quiet that followed, Alaric pressed his lips to her temple, a kiss soft as the years they'd claimed. "Our winter's end," he murmured. She was the maid who was fired in the snow, but she became the queen who melted the winter. The end. What part of this journey touched your heart or surprised you today? If you'd enjoy more historical love stories filled with healing and hope, let me know below. Please like, subscribe, and share to help others find these stories too. Thank you for spending your precious time here. Your next beautiful story is waiting on the screen.